Good morning. Welcome in. Friday, September 25th, last week of September and last week of quarter three as we get into quarter four of 2020. I'd like to start off with the most up-to-date ACCD leisurely travel restrictions. Again, this changes every Friday. So today, around 11 o'clock, they'll update this mapping. All these counties in New York that you see here that are kind of more of that yellow, they are again advised if you do travel for leisurely travel over the weekend for an overnight, you would have to quarantine for 7 days and take a test before coming back and joining the workforce. These do change, so as you can see, these ones right here are a little or kind of close to that threshold. So again, keep your eye on it because it changes every Friday. So just biggest thing is just keep up the communication, keep those open lines of communication going so we can just plan accordingly and making sure we're following best practices. So with that said, this week's code of conduct is to promote the code. It's one of our kind of highlights all of the 12 main points. So this week, let's promote it. Let's promote one another. Another 7 days without a recordable injury. So excellent job. Keep up the good job on the daily JHAs each morning. We're doing an excellent job submitting those JHAs. I've been reviewing them. You guys are doing an excellent job identifying hazards and putting up proper controls to mitigate using the hierarchy of controls. Again, we want to focus more on the engineering control and the administrative controls. And that PPE, that's really just our uniform that we wear each and every day in the construction industry. So keep up the good work. Let's keep working safe. Let's finish the 2020 season out strong, and let's try to get this number to 100. With that said, I'd like to pass it over to Amy. Amy is going to be joining us this week to talk more about our wellness series. And again, regarding to our recordable injury rate, Amy and her team over at PT360 have been really vital maintaining some really good prevention, because an ounce of prevention saves us a ton. Pass it over to Amy for her part. And I'll unmute you, Amy. Sorry about that.
All right, can you guys hear me and see my slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Amy.
Perfect. So today we're going to start with the second part of our low back pain series, and that's going to be talking about specific low back pain. So if you remember from a couple weeks ago, I showed you this slide kind of describing low back pain and the different types of low back pain people have, with most people in their life having low back pain. A very small percentage of that is from a serious illness. The majority of that is what we consider non-specific low back pain. And then there's about 5 to 10% of people that have low back pain with a specific cause. And today we're going to consider those two specific causes of a bulging disc and spinal stenosis. So what is specific low back pain when I talk about it? A specific cause of low back pain is when we could definitively say a specific structure is causing that pain. So if you look at this picture of our back to the right, you can see that there's a lot of structures right next to each other, right on top of each other, that are really hard to say what is causing the pain when someone has pain. A lot of these structures can cause similar types of pain. But with specific low back pain, we can point to a very specific structure, whether it be the nerve, the disc, the muscle, and say that we know that is causing the pain. So we're going to start with disc herniations to begin with. So if we look at this picture on the left, you guys know I love giving anatomy lessons here. I think it helps you understand what's happening in your body. On the top, we have a bird's eye view of what our back looks like. And on the bottom, we have the side view. So if you look at the side view first, you can see that the bones and discs are stacked nicely on top of each other. They're evenly spaced apart. And that's like a nice tall building that's standing really strong. If we look at the bird's eye view of this, we're going to see the components of that building and how it allows us to stay nice and strong. with the biggest thing being our disc. So if you see, I've labeled the disc, it has two portions of it. The outer portion, which is nice and strong and fibrous, so it is all these discs and bones stack up on top of each other. They're allowed to withstand that pressure as it wants to kind of bow out. And the inner disc is this gelatinous material that helps to resist compressive forces. So they work together to keep you not only nice and tall, but to keep you moving and to keep good space in your spine. You can see that we have the nerves here. Those are those yellow structures coming out from each side. And as you can see, the disc isn't touching those nerves. And there's a nice space there. If you look over at the picture of the herniated disc, it shows a much different story. So you see that gelatinous inner disc is now exploding out of that outer disc and pushing onto that yellow nerve right there. And that's taking up space and pressing on that nerve. Now, most importantly, that inner material is really toxic to the nerve. So that initial pain people get with a herniated disc is actually more related to the toxicity of that material on the nerve and the irritation it causes, more so in many cases than it pressing on the nerve. In either case, it's taking up space there. So herniated discs are also called slip discs or prolapse discs. Bulging discs, as I referred to in the beginning, is actually slightly different, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more with the non-specific low back pain. So herniated discs usually present after some kind of insignificant bending movement. So a lot of the time we hear that, oh, I just bent down to tie my shoe, I just got out of the car, I just twisted over to pick up something, and all of a sudden I felt my back go. What we hear from people is this can often occur after some kind of repeated bending movement. So maybe either earlier that day, the day before, or that week before, you went kayaking and did like a 6-hour kayaking trip, something you don't usually do on the weekend. Or maybe you threw a whole extra weekend of work and didn't get much sleep or rest and it ended up doing a lot of heavy lifting or shoveling, some kind of bending and twisting movement. And then all of a sudden this little thing throws you off after you did all of that hard work. Another thing we're also usually seeing is that it occurs in that middle-aged crowd, so that 20 to 50-year-old, and usually in men more often than women. So what does it feel like when you have a herniated disc? For the most part, you feel this sharp radiating pain through a narrow path in your leg. So usually people can point out to me that it runs down, say, the side of their leg, down all the way down to their foot. And that can often be accompanied by pins and needles. Sometimes that comes on immediately, and sometimes that can be delayed. In some cases, it can be pain-free, but you have no strength in your leg or feeling in parts of your leg. It's usually not all of your leg. And when that happens, that's usually that disc pushes out onto the nerve so much it compresses it, so the signals aren't being sent down to the leg anymore. So you don't feel any pain, but you also have trouble maybe lifting your foot, or if you touched your leg, you can't actually feel it. People often complain that pain is worse with sitting, bending, lifting, and the biggest ones for me are coughing and sneezing, because a lot of the other ones can overlap with other types of pain. But coughing and sneezing, when I hear that, that usually makes me think that the disc has herniated. Pain is often better lying down, and lying down on the side without pain. So if it hurts on your left side and your left leg, lying down on the right side can often be helpful, especially if you put a little pillow under your hips to kind of arch your back a little bit. Earlier, when this happens, usually no position's comfortable. It's hard to sit, it's hard to bend, it's hard to stand up straight. Usually after a couple days after that acute pain wears off, people tend to feel better standing up, walking, arching their back a little bit. So what do we do for this? The great news is most people do not need surgery. I'd say 90 to 95% of cases do not need surgery for a disc herniation. It really does, the body's really good at resolving it on its own. So I think when people have this big acute pain, it's really good to know that, you know, this does not mean you need to rush into surgery. And there's things that you can do to help. And I think just having that peace of mind can be helpful in reducing some initial pain and anxiety about how much pain you're having as well. So biggest thing is work in positions of comfort. Try to find those positions that work well for you and stay in them as much as possible. When you can, after those first few days where you can't move, try to start walking. And walking, you know, you don't want to go out for a 10-mile walk, maybe a little walk around the block, walk around your workplace, walk enough to get moving, but don't push into that pain. And get back to normal activities as soon as your pain subsides. You really want to make sure that you're not babying it longer than you have to, because that's going to start turning into some non-specific pain, low back pain, that tends to last for a lot longer than the actual irritation and the actual injury did. A lot of the time with this, our conservative treatment, which is our PT, our massage, our chiro, our acupuncture, can all be really helpful. It could help teach you how to get into the right positions. It could help loosen up those initial back spasms and get you moving a bit faster. Like I said, surgery is required in very few cases, and usually those cases are where you have that loss of strength or sensation, and that's prolonged. That's not changing with any kind of conservative treatment. And that's the thing where we want to decompress that nerve and take that pressure off of that nerve so that signal can start going back to your legs. But like I said, there's very few cases that happens where that pressure persists and the body doesn't change that on its own. So the second component I want to talk about of specific low back pain is spinal stenosis. Spinal stenosis has multiple components, with disc herniations being one of them. So again, if you look at this picture on the left with a normal spine, you can see again that our disc is not touching our yellow nerves. And you have that nice little kind of circle of the yellow in the middle, that's our spinal canal. The disc isn't touching that. And in the front, we have our joints. So those joints stack up on top of each other to allow our back to move. If you look at the picture of the right of somebody that has spinal stenosis, there's multiple components to this. So if you see that disc, it's now pushing into the yellow nerve and taking up space in that spinal canal. So it's not just pushing on the nerves on the sides, it's pushing onto that central part of your spine. Our joints are also changing. So if you look on the left, those joints are white and the edges are nice and clean. If you look on the right, those joints are no longer nice and clean. You have bone spurring and degeneration. That's kind of that red bumpiness that you see here. That's also taking up space and also pushing on that spinal canal and on those nerves. So what causes stenosis? There's three major components. One is the arthritic process. Some of the arthritic process is just genetic. Some of the arthritic process is from major or micro injuries. A major injury can definitely contribute to stenosis. Again, if you have an injury, a major injury when you're 20, 30 years old, when you're 50, 60, or 70, that might be showing up as part of stenosis later on. In prolonged postures that change how your ligaments and your discs are tolerating stress and force. So what all this does is it causes some bone spurs and joint degeneration. So bone spurs are just pieces of bone that grow around those joints, and they take up space. Ligaments can thicken and respond to this, or again, those prolonged postures. And discs change. So as we age, we lose height. So those bones start coming closer together and they give less space for those nerves. Or we could have those bulging or herniated discs that also take up space. So what it feels like, it feels similar, but slightly different than a disc herniation itself. A lot of the time people complain of numbness in the legs or feet, similar to disc herniations. Weakness in your legs is more common and more diffuse. So people will have difficulty lifting your foot or leg up, or just some generalized, my legs feel heavy and weak. One of the biggest complaints I see that differentiates this from just a straight up disc herniation is the pain or cramping in your legs with standing and walking. So people can stand up and walk for a few minutes, but after a while, their legs start to feel like lead and it's really hard to move. Pain with this is relieved with sitting or bending forward, which is quite different than with just a regular disc herniation. So initially, treatment for this is conservative. We really try to get people into physical therapy, massage, acupuncture, chiropractic. We really work on improving flexibility and mobility of your spine and your muscles around your spine, improving strength so that your spine is better supported and has a second way to absorb forces, and improving cardiovascular endurance. So really getting you to walk or bike more and improving your overall health. If conservative treatment fails, which means you're not really responding to it after, a 3 or 6 month period, surgical treatment can be an option for this. And this can vary from anything that we call minimally invasive, where they go in, they do, a cleanup, to something where a spinal fusion, where they are putting metal in your spine so that it does not move anymore in certain areas. So the treatment varies for this. And with spinal stenosis, this is something that occurs in the older population. So our 50 plus population, it's not occurring usually in our 20, 30, and 40-year-olds, but we start to see this as degenerative changes happen in our body. So again, with all these moving parts that we talked about last time, how do we prevent these 5 to 10% of injuries that we consider parts failures, that we could say this specific part of our body failed on us? Or how do we prevent repetitive stress injuries from occurring that can lead to these parts failures? So like we talked about last time, really being aware of these high-risk movements. Sometimes we do have to perform them, but is there a better way to perform them? That bending and twisting. So it could be something as simple as this guy up top that's spreading some dirt. He's standing in a bent over position and he's doing a lot of twisting, and he could be doing this for hours. So something as simple as that, is there a better way to stand and do that if we have to do that as often? Lifting weight far away from your body. The farther away from our body the weight gets, the more stress we put on our back. So could we be smart about how we lift if we're doing a lot of, whether it's light or heavy lifting? And avoiding bending over to pick up a weight like this guy on the right. That's a surefire way to increase your risk of, in particular, a disc herniation. So if we can help prevent any of these disc herniations from happening, or in the short term and when we're younger, it can help prevent spinal stenosis when we're older. So prepare, prepare, prepare. Biggest piece of advice I could have, besides doing these things, being aware of your high risk movement and really trying to manage them and do them in a better way when you have to do them, is consider doing a daily back warm up. If you're somebody that's doing regular back exercise, back activity, so you're doing heavy lifting, you're doing a lot of shoveling, you're doing a lot of standing even, a lot of carrying of things throughout the day. Maybe every day, spend 5 or 10 minutes in the morning and do a little back warm up. It could be something as simple as bending down and touching your toes and reaching up, doing some spinal twists, like laying on your back and bending your knees and swinging them side to side, doing some gentle bridges. It doesn't have to be much, but it can be enough to help prepare your body for what it's going to do throughout the day. If you're sedentary, so it means you're sitting at a desk, you're driving a truck all day, you're working in a machine all day, and then say you get out, every couple hours and you do some heavy lifting, you're helping somebody else, finish up some work for the day, maybe it becomes the culture for you guys to just say, hey, give me a second, let me just, flex my abs a couple times, let me bend over and touch my toes and reach up, let me just prepare my back for this, these things I want to do so that I don't end up with a back injury and end up in therapy and out of work. We really want to prevent that from happening. So, with this back pain series, we have one more talk to go over, and that's non-specific low back pain, to kind of round out all of this. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Very informative. We do have exercises, kind of a print-off sheet available to all employees if they want to look into some more stretching. And I think definitely stretching before we do extenuously demanding work is really critical in prevention. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ken, you have control.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Let's see here. I'm going to switch over to the email of the week. Can you see that?
We can, Ken.
Okay, good. Well, for announcements, we've been talking about the transfer tank logs. We finally have launched the fuel log on the supervisor/foreman teams channel. So look for that tab and click it on the onto fuel log, and then prepare it and submit it. So if you can't figure that out, just check with probably the safety department, or hopefully Scott Burns is educated on it, and others. And also just a reminder again, the 5th annual ECI flu shot clinic will be Friday, October 16th, and there's a questionnaire to fill out, which you can connect to on that link that's highlighted. 401k is a standing reminder on the 401k, and reach out to Morgan Stanley. And new employees, we have Joe Rozadowski returning. Welcome back, Joe. And also Jeff Paquette. Welcome, Jeff. So we have the ECI COVID policies if you need to refer to them. And for this week, we are highlighting the Middlebury Tunnel project. This is an update upon the reopening. So this is called the VTrans Whacker 23 in Middlebury. And this somewhat hard sketch to read here is that from the plans, from the front of the plans, north is to the right. So it's a long linear stretch of railroad crossing through the center of Middlebury and crosses the Merchants Row and Main Street right in the center there, that triangle shaped area. And the Otter Creek runs along to the west side or on the top. So we're subcontracted with Kubricki Construction for the Middlebury Tunnel project, and reopening of the railroad tunnel and the Main Street and Merchants Row was celebrated on Friday with the first trains passing through the tunnel, followed by the first vehicles on the surface roads. ECI first became involved in the project way back in 2013. So this is the first train. It's actually just before it's pushing through the tunnel on the south side. It's pulling several passenger coach cars. There were guests that were invited to be on that ride, including ourselves. And then this is the ceremony on the surface roads. This is Main Street. Merchants Row is turning off to the left there. The police were the first to pass through, and then the fire department and other people. And this is just before that, the crowd listening to the select board person and the VTrans officials and that kind of thing. It was a big deal for Middlebury. And the reopening tops off a successful 10-week shutdown of both the surface streets and the railroad. So both a big impact to both the city and the railroad, which allowed for uninterrupted construction though. So preparations for the shutdown have been occurring since last fall with relocation of underground utilities and installation of the excavation support system. And even more than that, back in 2018, ECI installed the stormwater pipes within 3 62-inch diameter tunnels, mostly through rock. The new railroad tunnel, which consists of precast concrete section, allow for taller rail cars and provides a covered section through the Main Street and Merchants Row area, which were previously supported by just a pair of bridges. So the whole area was open between the bridges that dropped down to the lower grade of the tracks and was kind of overgrown and unsightly and maybe somewhat dangerous and had ice problems and all kinds of things. So for the railroad anyway. And here we are doing a little of the track work. There was track work, of course, the removal of the track upon the start of the shutdown, and then installation of the track, the new rail, and new ties afterwards. This is some of the excavation going on. Our section that we were responsible for was from the little bit north of Main Street all the way to almost to Seymour Street in the rail yard. This view is looking, I think this is looking north. Yes, this is looking north from probably Cross Street Bridge, roughly. I think its photo's been cropped down a little bit, although I'm not quite sure. But anyway, you can see the precast sections installed and a new one being dropped into place. And the precast sections were a two-piece for the tunnel, so the top pieces were dropped in after the bottom course was done. And then afterwards, there was a ballast mat liner that we installed throughout the tunnel, and the U-wall sections, they call them the U-walls at the ends of the portal ends and beyond to transition to near grade. There was U-cast or U-shaped precast sections, and then at the final transition, there was the precast concrete blocks. So after you get out of the U-shaped sections, there's another little transition to meet grade. So that's what I got for the project. For the photo archives, I'm showing some kind of a different type of tunnel construction. This was the Bellows Falls Tunnel clearance improvements back in 2007. Clearly a little bit different flavor of tunnel construction, rehab in this case, so it would be, but it looks like it's a lot noisier, dirtier, and darker, which you may think of more for tunnel construction. That's what I got. I'll turn it back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Ken. One quick correction, that mapping has changed now. It's updated every Tuesday. So what I showed earlier today, the leisurely travel guidance has been updated for this week. So next Tuesday will be the next update. Other than that, it should be a beautiful day. Let's go out and enjoy it. Let's have a safe day. And this weekend's looking like our last 80-degree weekend until about 6 months from now. So let's finish out the week strong so we can enjoy the weekend. Thank you.